He wasn't 600 years old when he started. He was 600 when he finished. For decades before that, an old man was out in a field, cutting wood for a boat, in a place that had never seen rain fall from the sky. No ocean nearby, no flood in sight. Just one man building something nobody else believed in. The question isn't how he found the energy at 600. It's why he started at all, with zero proof he was right. This is Noah, not a king, not a general, not anyone with power in his world. He's the 10th generation from Adam, a family head in a world with no nations yet, no laws, no cities like we'd recognize. Genesis 6:9 calls him blameless in his generation, but that word doesn't mean sinless. In Hebrew, it's tamim. It means wholehearted, all in, not perfect, committed. That distinction matters, because the man you're about to watch is not a flawless hero. He's a deeply ordinary man who did one extraordinary thing, and then, later, failed badly at something else entirely. Keep that in your back pocket. We'll get there. Genesis 5 tells us Noah was 500 when his 3 sons were born. Genesis 7 tells us he was 600 when the flood actually arrived. Somewhere in that 100-year gap, God gives him the assignment: build a massive vessel out of gopher wood to a scale nobody around him has ever attempted. Genesis 6 lays out the dimensions like a blueprint. This wasn't a weekend project. Historians and Bible scholars have long debated how long the actual build took, but even the most conservative readings put it at years, not months. Here's what nobody tells you about that timeline. The popular version of this story, 600-year-old man starts an insane project, isn't actually what the text says. He didn't start at 600. He'd been building for years, maybe decades, before that number ever shows up. Which means the real story isn't about starting old. It's about something a little less flashy and honestly more useful. Starting without the world's permission, long before anyone else could see why. That's where this bends towards something bigger than ancient history.
Because most people don't fail to pursue their real purpose because they're too old. They fail because the thing they're supposed to build has no proof of concept yet. No rain, no flood, no evidence. We'll come back to that. So picture it honestly. Noah is out there day after day, cutting timber, sealing wood, building something the size of a small ship in a landlocked world that has never experienced rain the way we know it. Genesis doesn't record a single person helping him. It doesn't record applause. What it does show in Genesis 6:22 is one repeated phrase: he did all that God commanded him. Not he had a moment of inspired heroism. He was executed, repeatedly, for years. That's the part every retelling of this story skips because it's not cinematic. There's no dramatic montage in the text, just sustained, unglamorous plank-by-plank obedience with zero external validation. And here's the part most versions of this story flatten out completely because it ruins the tidy ending. Noah's not a flawless hero. After the flood, after the covenant, after the rainbow, Genesis 9 tells us Noah gets drunk in his vineyard and something happens in his tent that leads to a family curse being pronounced on his grandson Canaan. The text doesn't explain it away. It doesn't redeem him in the next verse. It just sits there, uncomfortable at the end of his story. A man capable of decades of quiet, disciplined faithfulness is the same man who falls apart completely once the pressure's off. If your version of this story ends at, and they lived happily ever after on dry land, you're not telling the real one. Now, here's the mechanism, not the theme, the actual mechanism that connects this to purpose and long-term work in your own life. Noah's Ark wasn't built because he saw a flood coming. The text is explicit. The instruction came first. The rain came after. That order matters.
In your life, the project that's actually yours, the business, the skill, the body of work, the thing you keep circling back to, will almost never come with proof it's going to work before you start. You don't get the flood first. You get the assignment first, and you find out later whether you were right. Noah's advantage wasn't confidence. It was that he kept adding planks anyway. That's a mechanism you can actually copy. Confidence isn't required. Continued output is. There's a moment in the New Testament that reframes this whole thing. Hebrews 11:7 puts Noah in its list of people who acted in reverent fear on warning about things not yet seen. Not things he was sure about, things not yet seen. That's not a story about certainty. It's a story about building before the evidence exists. Noah finishes the ark. The flood comes, and he and his family survive it. The text doesn't hide that this is also a story about judgment and mass loss, not just a triumphant building project. And it's worth sitting with that discomfort rather than skipping past it. He steps out onto dry ground, and God gives him a covenant marked by a rainbow, a promise, not a reward for good behavior. Here's the one sentence to take with you. Noah's purpose didn't require proof. It required output before the proof existed. And here's the actual specific thing to do with that this week. Identify the one long-horizon project you've been postponing because nobody's validated it yet. No client, no boss, no market, no flood in the distance to justify it. Then build one real finished piece of it. Not a plan, not research. One tangible plank. A page written, a prototype built, a first client conversation had. Something that exists whether or not anyone approves of it yet. That's what Noah actually did, over and over for years, before there was a single drop of rain. So ask yourself honestly, what's the project you've been waiting to feel sure about before you start? What would it look like to build the one plank you could build this week with zero external proof it's the right call? A quick honesty note, because this channel doesn't pretend certainty it doesn't have. Scholars still debate whether the flood account describes a global or a regional event, and the timeline of exactly how long the ark took to build isn't stated outright in the text. We're reading it from the gap between two ages given in Genesis. Historical flood epics from Mesopotamia, like Gilgamesh, tell strikingly similar stories, and scholars disagree on what that relationship actually means. None of that changes the core of what we just walked through. It just means I'd rather tell you what's genuinely uncertain than pretend this is all settled. If this kind of honest, checkable read on these stories is useful to you, subscribe. There's a lot more of these coming. And if you want to know what happens when someone doesn't wait for permission, but also doesn't have Noah's discipline, the next one is a story you'll want to see.